Let's turn to Ron Johnson. So he was on Brian Kilmeade's podcast.
I need more Kilmeade. The Fox stuff isn't enough on TV. Actually, that's where you get the really unfiltered Kilmeade.
Yeah.
He's too polished on TV. You really want to hear what he says on his podcast.
Later,
honestly, if there is one of those Fox and Friends people I do want to hear more of, it is probably Brian Kilmeade, and not because he's very smart. It's I want to know how dumb he could get when the TV filter isn't on.
I think they should all go their separate ways after the show, like literally after the show's recorded, and record like 5 separate podcasts that just come out like the same day. So you can just have wall to wall Fox and Friends and then solo Fox and Friends and content. You should just never be able to like get away from them.
Well, it is fun because you can see how fractured they are. Like Ducey's trying to be a bit more reasonable, but Kilmeade is just like a brute who has who really just is more suited to the current conservative moment for sure. Here he is.
Oh, I should add, by the way, I'm sure it is distributed as a podcast too, but this isn't just a podcast. This is a show. Brian Kilmeade shows on Fox News Radio, which is like streamed on terrestrial radio, the airwaves. It actually gets radio play, if you can believe it.
So, well, then more people get to hear Ron Johnson say this awful stuff. Conservatives love revisionist history, and they do it because actual history is very unfavorable to them. They do it by conflating the Democratic Party with the left when it comes to slavery. They do it constantly by bastardizing Martin Luther King Jr.'s message. And here they are doing it during this time period with the AIDS crisis in a way that's quite despicable, in my opinion. Here is Ron Johnson comparing Dr. Fauci's response to COVID to Dr. Fauci's response to AIDS in the 1980s.
Because killing your host doesn't help you replicate very well. So again, that's sort of the general tendency of viruses. So why would we expect anything different with the coronavirus, except for you want to create a state of fear to keep us in the state of fear, to maintain the controls, and that's what you're seeing here in the United States. I mean, by the way, Fauci did the exact same thing with AIDS. He overhyped it. He created all kinds of fear, saying it could affect the entire population when it couldn't. And he's using the exact same playbook for COVID, ignoring therapy, pushing a vaccine. The solution to this, I've always felt, was early treatment. We still haven't robustly explored that, and that's a travesty.
And I want to move on to this
So that
shit, I didn't know there was an AIDS vaccine. Holy shit, we got some breaking science news here, folks.
That's this United States Senator Ron Johnson saying that Fauci, who's now become their, I guess, boogeyman and evil overlord that makes them wear masks sometimes, and it's incredibly inconvenient for people, that Fauci overhyped AIDS. AIDS, not that big of a deal. It only could affect certain segments of the population, so don't overhype it. Maybe just let it run rampant in those specific sections. I wonder who Ron Johnson is referring to there. And then let the rest of us live our lives.
I think I just saw a statistic today that like the COVID-19 has killed about twice as many people, on documented record as AIDS has in the past. Well, I mean, AIDS in the 40 years, but, in the United States, but COVID in the past 2. So like, if nothing else, like that comparison is not quite apt, but, AIDS devastated entire populations, not just in terms of the biomedical ramifications, but, their access to healthcare, their stigmatization in the media. It was part of a larger narrative about, gay men and their hygiene. And if anything, COVID-19 has been treated way less seriously, if only because it's a broadly applicable virus, and it can't be it can't be said to be the entire fault of one population.
Right. And if you get COVID and you're younger, you are more likely to survive if you're not older or you don't have a pre-existing condition. So you can compare it and downplay it to the flu. And then for AIDS, even though it was incredibly deadly at the time, we now have PrEP and other amazing scientific achievements, but especially at the time, you could attach it to a certain population and then stigmatize it in that way and pretend that us pure morally upstanding, clean, white collar people, that we would not be affected by this virus among the deviants, among the artists, among the people who are shooting up and having sex with the other men in that area. Like, that was what they were able to do with AIDS. But it's like the idea that he's saying in both instances they were overhyped as dangerous, when in reality it was the opposite. Reagan deliberately did not act on HIV/AIDS because he was fine with it decimating gay people and black people and intravenous drug users. And here with under Trump didn't want the pure scope of how COVID was affecting the population to be revealed. So he didn't put in place many measures that could have saved lives. It's literally the inverse of what Ron Johnson is saying, which is disgusting.
And what's so insane about this entire period to me has been how all the people who started this period, the pandemic, saying this is going to be the flu. Or like Dr. Oz saying this is the panic attacks caused by worrying if you have COVID are actually going to kill as many people with coronavirus. And it's like, those people have just completely moved on to other ways of saying we're taking it, we're freaking out too much about it. And we have 750,000 people dead in this country. And that might be a low estimate. If you go by excess mortality, it could be close to 1 million people. And none of those people were saying 1 million people were actually on the table. They were making fun of any projection that showed even like 500,000 were going to die, as if that was too hysterical. And we're like there. And yeah, it's just drives me.
It drives me crazy too, because there's just like such a lack of accountability that people have also just like given up on having any real memory of what people were saying a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago, to the point where it's like, if it's not literal video, and even if it is, it might as well just be cast off into the ether, because like we just have no way to, like, let's say, okay, this person was wrong on 9/11 and then they were wrong on the housing market crisis, but they've just been a fixture of our television for 20 years or a fixture of our pundit class for 10 years. It's just like, so the cumulative wrongness is never enough to stop really engaging with them as somebody who could possibly be right. People are just constantly taught to give them the benefit of the doubt and like, oh, well, normally I don't agree with Tucker, or normally I don't agree with this, asshole at the New York Times, but this time, they're correct. And I want to be on the record as having been the one who figured out which time Nate Silver was correct. And then when he's not correct, everyone just starts to cycle over again.
Right.
It is analogous how people like Ron Johnson don't seem to care about mass casualty events. I mean, AIDS and COVID, very different things, obviously. Transmission is much different. A lot of people died with both, though. And they just, they to them, it's like, oh, it's just all a big hyped mess. None of these things are really that severe, even though millions of people have died from each. I mean, it's just incredible how they just, brush it to the side. Like, these things are no biggie.
I think they would care more about COVID-19 if, like, the China virus narrative, that this is a problem that came from China, that is China's fault, and that we can hold quote unquote China accountable for, had been able to stick in people's minds the way we blame the entire Middle East for 9/11. And since that just was not possible, given the many reasons why it became clear that America was doing worse than every other country in the world at, keeping people alive from COVID.
Yeah, but what they do in that instance is just like militarily respond.
Yeah, exactly. So like, maybe we could care more about the mass casualty event, like at the national level, in a way that like resembles people's familiarity with like what caring looks like, which always goes back to 9/11. That's why everything is always measured in 9/11. Well, all deaths are always measured in 9/11 is because it was the last time people could really point to like a point in which, America seemed to have cared about a mass casualty event in a way that spurred action, even if that action was incredibly wrong and incredibly misguided and aimed at the wrong people. Americans still have nostalgia for it. And now, 8 9/11s of people are dying a day, or were dying a day at the peak of this. But like, since it can't be blamed on a foreign actor that we can hold accountable and militarily, it's just like, well, what is American life really worth, right? If it's not a vehicle to invade a foreign power.